What is the scariest/creepiest thing you have seen/heard? I've been living alone for less than a week. I got some Chinese takeout and was eating in front of the TV. I finished my meal and cracked open the fortune cookie. It read, "You will have a visitor tonight. Lock your door." There were no visitors that night, but the memory still haunts me. There's a FARC thread somewhere that described a guy taking a scenic route in the middle of the night to get to a certain town. He was driving up a hill and came upon a car accident with two cars on the side of the road and a person lying down on the ground. For some reason, he caught a bad vibe from it and slowly drove past the scene. He stopped about 100 feet past it, looked behind him, and the person on the ground was standing up and staring at him with about 20 other people coming out of the woods. Nope. After living in my house alone for 8 years, I came to the realization that I had closed a lot more doors than I had opened. I was once in a hot tub with some friends late at night, and we were all telling some stories. One of the guys told us this one, a story of a girl he knows. Not sure if it is true, but multiple people in the hot tub who knew her verified it was true. So one day this girl was called over to babysit. She did a lot for these people, so it was routine for her. Anyways, she was told to put the kids to bed at 9, and she did. After she put them to bed, she started watching TV and doing homework, waiting for the parents to come home. But then she started hearing some noises coming out of the basement, like pans falling and stuff. She just ignored it and thought it was the washing machine or something. Anyway, a little later, she starts hearing the noises again. She decided to call the police and tell them that she was hearing noises coming out of the basement at the house she's babysitting at. The lady at the station told her there's a patroller in her area and that he'll be at the house in about 20 minutes. Anyways, in about 5 minutes, she hears a knock on the door. She answers, and it's a full SWAT team. She asks, "I thought they were just sending a patroller," and one of the guys told her, "After you hung up the phone, we heard a second phone on the line hang up." Ended up, there was a man in the basement listening to the conversation. The lady in the station waited and heard him hang up, then immediately sent the SWAT team to help. They went downstairs and caught him. He was wanted for multiple cases of murder. Ooh, damn, that one actually got me. No idea if it's true, but that put a chill right up my spine. The Smiling Man. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways away from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward. Smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the F do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper, "What the f-?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid, but he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way. And this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until it was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. Okay, once again, I have no idea if this story is true, but I can tell you one thing for sure. It is one of the creepiest stories I've read in one of these threads. I might need to use this in the next horror TTRPG I run because, damn! I used to work in a trailer park for my parents. Quite often, people would start using methamphetamine, begin to fall behind on rent, and get evicted. Whenever we evicted someone, their trailer was usually too torn to crap to actually do anything useful with it. Essentially, to prevent having a pile of crap trailer in the middle of the park, we'd buy it from them and just tear it down. Anyway, then the scary, creepy part. Many of those occupants had children. More than half of all of the children's rooms I found had locks on the door from the outside. Inside the children's rooms, it was always quite evident that the kids would sometimes be locked inside for days at a time due to the bathroom corners that would sometimes appear. The doors on the inside of the rooms typically had scratch marks along the edge of the door and the door frame. Getting rid of all the stuff inside before beginning demolition always frightened me. I was always afraid that I'd end up finding a dead child somewhere among the filth. It never happened, but the odds of it potentially happening were, in my opinion, quite high. I was babysitting my niece one Friday night while my brother-in-law took his wife to dinner. She has a strict bedtime of 8 p.m., so after successfully getting her to sleep, no small task, I decided I would watch the Skyfall movie that people wouldn't shut up about. About halfway into the movie, I am absolutely chilled to the bone when Sophie, who sneaked out of bed and behind the couch, says directly into my ear mere inches away, "You know James Bond murdered Jesus, right?" I haven't offered to watch her again. Sophie, you're awesome. I saw this little bird walking on the street when suddenly a seagull grabbed it in its mouth. Seagulls started to smash this helpless bird against the ground a few times. After a while, it ate the bird, and I saw a bump on the seagull's neck like the bird was stuck in its throat. Then it flew off. I was just standing there and said, "What the F? Seagulls shouldn't do that." F seagulls. I once saw a video of a pelican eating a seagull, so hey, at least the effed up circle of life got its revenge, right? Nature is wild. My dad died of cancer the day I turned 16 after about 2 weeks in a coma. It was really fast, less than 2 months between diagnosis and death. He died in the house. We had a hospice attendant, and my mom was very good about seeing to him in those final days. Anyway, a lot of weird crap happened after he passed, but the one that still freaks me out when I think about it happened about 12 hours before he took to bed for the last time. He was in our living room napping on the couch while my mom was in the kitchen cooking. No one else was home. Suddenly, he jerked awake and was shouting for my mom in a very loud, agitated voice, clearly angry with her. "Beverly, don't do that. Don't ever do that again." She ran into the room, alarmed, and asked what he was talking about, and he said, Don't do that. Don't walk past me like that in that long black wig." Sometimes I think he saw death. I was about 15 minutes from finishing the night shift at work when there was a massive crash on one of the windows in the office, so I get up and go to check it out. Someone has thrown quite a sizable rock through one of the windows on the front of the building. This is made especially weird because I'm working in the industrial district at 11:30 at night with none of the other businesses open. I go back to my desk, put a quick call through to security to let them know, and decide to head home. As I'm leaving the building, I'm freaking myself out about it more and more and end up running to my car, getting in, and taking off. I'm almost home and I've started to calm down a bit when I realize that I didn't unlock my car when I got in. It had been unlocked the whole time. I do a quick check with my hand in the back seat for any possible murderers that might be hanging around there, but there's nothing there. Fast forward 30 minutes. I've called a friend of mine who says he is out drinking, so I decide I'm going to join him. I jump on my bicycle and start riding over. I'm doodling along the road on my bike. It's a nice night and I'm in no big rush, just enjoying the moonlight when I hear someone riding behind me. I straighten up and stick to one side of the road. He passes me really slowly, and when he is right beside me, he shoots me a smile I can describe as purely insane. I kind of flinch and am taken aback as he rides on. That's when I realize he is riding my mom's bike. Needless to say, I sprint home. When I get there, sure enough, her bike is missing and one of my car's doors is open, the back left one. I was driving and had no need to open that door. Maybe not the creepiest, but what's on my mind right now? I just moved into this house a year ago. There are child-sized handprints on one of my bathroom walls. Permanent handprints you can only see from a certain angle, like what water exposure does to paint. The previous owners have no idea what I'm talking about, and I don't know how they got there. Woke up one night around 1 a.m., heard the shower was on. At first, I thought it was my brother. He works night shifts, so he had come home late and was in the shower. It went on for about half an hour until I got up and went to see what the F he was doing. No one was in the shower. My brother wasn't home yet. I was the only one in the house. Still to this day, I have no idea how it turned on or who did it. Almost 5 years later, I still think about it and crap myself. Even writing this now, I feel like turning every light on in the house. Why do I do this to myself? I also had this once. I came home and heard the shower was on. I moved to the kitchen, my bathroom is connected through the kitchen, and see loads of steam coming out of the bathroom. At this point, I was scared beyond belief, but I had to check it out. So I checked it out, and the shower was on with streaming hot water. The only logical explanation is that I have a shower mat which I usually drape over the shower head, and the shower mat had fallen down. So I concluded the shower mat hit the heat valve. Right? Yes, absolutely just the shower mat. That is exactly what I would be telling myself while I walked around my house gripping a knife and turning on every single light. I house sit for a family friend when she goes out of town. The woman who lives there is really into a bunch of spiritual stuff, New Age stuff, Reiki, etc. The very first time I was house sitting, I was outside watering the plants. I was the only one there and had closed the door after me. From the driveway where I was watering, I had a completely unobstructed view of the front door, the only door that was unlocked at the time. When I went back inside, there on the little table next to the front door was a half-eaten cookie. The table had been completely clear when I went outside, and I hadn't seen cookies that looked like that anywhere in the house. Nothing too creepy, but very puzzling and unsettling. When the woman returns, I mention it to her, and she laughs and she goes, "Gets ghosts all the time." I'm a fairly skeptical person, but honestly, ghosts were the best explanation. The next time I was over, I was pooping around 10:30. The house itself is fairly old and creaks from time to time, but nothing too loud or disruptive. While I was pooping, here comes a single loud knock from the other side of the bathroom door. This wasn't a little creak or pop from the house, it was a loud, determined rap on the door. It was enough to scare my poop back in for the rest of the night. You said poop one too many times. I'm gonna have to fine you for that one, OP. About a year ago, I was climbing a tree in my front yard at around 4:30 a.m. I'd walked a lady friend to her car and was killing time until I got the "I'm home" text, and the weather was nice for tree climbing, so I just did it. This particular night, my neighbors didn't lock their gate like they normally do, leaving easy access to their tool shed, lawnmower, etc. I guess the guy forgot, it happens, but it was definitely noticeable. Large gate right next to the road, expensive old man tools. So as I observed the gate from my lofty perch and considered all of the reasons it would be open, I noticed a car coming down my street very slowly. eventually coming to a halt right in front of my neighbor's driveway. I looked into the car and saw two young men pointing and looking intently around his yard. Sketchy crap during daylight, much more so at night. After a minute or so of being too nervous to do anything at all, I realized I was leaning pretty heavy on some branches, exposing myself more than when these two had just driven up. That was when it happened. The guy in the passenger seat noticed me first. He did a panicky sort of double take when he first saw me, followed by what I genuinely assumed to be the words, "oh crap," and rapidly punching the driver in the arm. Attempting to look menacing, I did the only thing I could think of, which was hold my arms up in a claw-like pose, like a tree rex. When the driver saw me, he did the same panicky double take before slamming the gas and hauling butt out of Dodge. I like to think I was the creepiest/scariest thing those two ever saw. I am the night. I am vengeance. I am Tree Rex. I was buying a house last year, and one of the places I decided to look at was a renovated farmhouse. The main building itself was pretty nice, and I was considering it as an option, but then the realtor took me to check out the old barn that was on the property. From the outside, it looked like it could be converted into a really nice workshop. I walked inside and almost immediately felt something fall on my head. I brushed it away and did the get off me dance until it fell to the ground. It was a tiny spider. Then another drop on my head. I repeated my freak out and got another, larger spider out of my hair. Then I made the mistake of looking up. There was a huge black spot on the wall, which I realized after my eyes focused was the biggest effing cluster of spiders I've ever seen in my life. In that moment, I was a faster sprinter than Usain Bolt. Ah! I hate it. I hate it so much. I was playing around with the radio once when I was a kid, just slowly spanning through the static trying to find a station. I'd found an old television antenna, attached it to the side of our house, and ran a wire out my window to it with an alligator clip attached to the radio antenna, allowing me to get a way broader range of signals. So I'm sitting there early in the morning, like 2 a.m., slowly sweeping frequencies, and suddenly I get to the station that's playing this very weird crackling sound. It sounds sort of like cracking knuckles or maybe Rice Krispies cereal, but with a fixed rhythmic pattern instead of being random. I sat there listening to it for a second, then it suddenly stopped, and this faint voice says, "It doesn't work. We're already dead. We're already dead." It took a second for the weight of the words to hit me, but when they did, I freaked the hell out and almost threw the radio across the room. I'm pretty sure it was just someone messing around with a radio transmitter, but damn if it didn't scare the crap out of me at the time. To see The Sixth Sense when it first came out with my wife. I just moved into our new house, and my wife was pretty shaky when we came home. We didn't have kids at this point. She insisted that I go through all of the rooms in the house to check for who knows what. Being a dutiful husband, I eye-rollingly went through all of the bedrooms and was finishing up in the guest bathroom. The door was ajar and I pushed it open and heard right next to my head the loudest, most blood-curdling scream ever. Turns out that the cat was behind the door and somehow had its tail in the jam, and when I opened it, it got pinched. Man. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.